In this tutorial, we will look at how to generate dynamic pivot columns in BigQuery. For example, when we pivot data, it converts input column rows into pivot columns with aggregate of values data, like this. This is usually done by specifying pivot column constants in the pivot function, but we can also generate these values dynamically. So when a new value appears in the input data, a pivot column will be generated for it dynamically. Let's go ahead and see how to do that in practical. So this is my sample dataset on which I am going to do the demonstration of this tutorial. Now if we look at this sample dataset, I have three categories in this: electronics, books, fashion. So if I pivot this data, this will become my pivot columns. How I can do that is, I can just take this and apply the BigQuery pivot function. So if I apply that, I can put that I want sum of amount for my category in, and then I can specify all three categories. So it will be like this. Then I have books, and then I have fashion. Okay, if I run this, the same data becomes pivoted, and these are my pivot columns, which are nothing but my unique categories. Now if I have to make it dynamic, that whatever distinct categories I have in my base data, that becomes my pivot columns without specifying any constant values. So how I can do that is, I can do that by scripting, that is execute immediate command. But how I can apply those values here, we are going to see step by step. So the step 1 will be that I will need the distinct categories on a dynamic basis from the base data. So if I take this and I do distinct category, then at any point of time, whatever are the distinct categories in that data column, I will get those. Whether we add new values or we remove the existing values, it will give at that point of time whatever the unique category values are. Now what I need from this output is, I don't need this output in row format. I need this output in this format, where it is coming into a single string value, which I can then use in my script. So how I can do that is, I can apply string aggregate function on this output. How? Let's see. So if I put string aggregate from this and I specify the column, I specify the column category in this. So if I run this now, so I have got all the three categories now in a single row separated by comma. The one thing which is missing here is that we don't have the single quotes needed in the start and end of this category. So I can add that as well. If I go here and I run concat, and in concat I basically add a single quote before category and add a single quote after category. So something like this. Okay, so now I have got the output values generated as I will be providing in the pivot function. Now if I get a new value in this, does it calculate that? Yes, it will. So I will insert a new value. And I will run this again. So now my new value is added to the pivot column names. Okay. Now what I need to do next is, I need to assign this value, this output, to a variable and then use that variable in my pivot function. So how I can do that is, the first thing I will do is, I will declare a variable. So let's name this variable as unique category and data type as string. Now once I declare this variable, I need to populate this value into this variable. So how I can do that is, let's copy this from here, and I can do that easily with execute immediate command. So I will just put that query here, okay, and I will tell that output the result of this query to this variable, okay. Now I can also validate if my variable gets that data by selecting the value of variable. So if I run this, and I view the results, I can see that the variable got the required value. Now what I need to do is, I need to use this variable in my pivot function to make my pivot columns dynamic. So now let's go back and copy the pivot query for that step. So if I copy this and I take it here and I add another execute immediate, in this I provide this query. So this is my static pivot columns query. Now to make it dynamic, we are going to utilize format function. So in this, we are going to provide this variable as an input, and this we will change with %s. Why %s? Because our variable is containing string values, okay. So this is my query to make the pivot columns dynamic. Now if I run this and see the result, so I can see that my columns has been pivoted and generated dynamically. So this is how we can generate dynamic pivot columns. Now to validate this, that this will work with addition of any new value or the removal of any existing value, let's add one more value to it. So if I add one more category, let's say shoes, and I provide some value to it, I run this. Now if I will run the script, I should get a dynamic pivot column generated with the name shoes. So let's validate it. Now if I view the results, I can see that I got my pivot column generated dynamically.